afternoon, Mr. Wheeler.
Hi, Robin. Nice to see you again.
Yes, it is. And can I call you Michael again?
I think that's the best name I can think of. Yeah,
Fantastic.
Yes.
Now, we appreciate you giving your time to this historic video and, and everything you... Oh, let me start that again. Sorry, I'll start that again.
Start the whole thing again.
Yeah, I've got a bit word-tied there.
Doing very well until that.
Yeah. Ready? Good afternoon, Mr. Wheeler.
Good afternoon, Robin.
Thank you. Can I call you Michael?
Well, why not? That's very good.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me your time to show this history to the wider audience, and we much appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Now, can we start off with your family history and the farming, where it's sort of intermingled with the farming and your family history then? So please.
Your family history on the farming side would go back to the year 1840s. I think that I can trace it back to, and it would go back to the middle of Sussex, a place called West Hoathly, where there were two families who decided to leave mid-Sussex and wanted to go to Kent for different reasons. The family was Wheeler, which is my family, and the other one was called Arnold, which is another family which went into the engineering side of things in East Peckham. They both, in fact, went to East Peckham, where they knew the land was better for farming, the Wheelers did, and also there was scope for greater engineering for the Arnold family.
Oh, okay.
So the Arnold family were very, very close to the Wheeler family. And in fact, if you go to West Hoathly Graveyard, just outside the pub called the Cat, just there you will see lines and lines of the families lined up together. So not only close in life, they were close in death as well. So they were great friends even when it came to Kent. And the Arnold family, the very first motor car, or one of the very first, with a Benz engine in from Germany, would have been propelled by a man called Walter Arnold, who got the very first speeding ticket in the UK. So he certainly had that to remember. So that's a little bit of history going back a long way, back to 1840s. Since that time, this farm was bought in about 1890, more like. So that was just Bockingfold Farm, which was just one.
Yeah.
And of course, there are many others which now comprise Bockingfold Farm. There's Mill Farm, there's Hook Farm, there's Bennett's Farm, there's Brambles Farm, and probably one other I haven't thought of. Quite a few, all made into one.
Is this different family members or is it a collective?
Well, there were several farmers or farmers-to-be when my father was growing up, and there would be three farmers, three brothers and three farmers, which was slightly unusual because normally one went into the church and the other one would have gone into the army and the other into farming would be the norm.
Right.
But in fact, they were all very keen on farming, so they all were looking out for another farm to be in. And my father settled here, being the oldest. And of course, in the 1930s was when people realised that the more land you had, the more money you lost. So that was a problem. And that was a time of opportunity as well. So people realised the opportunity when land was worth £30 an acre in 1930, 50 in 1950, that's quite easy to remember. And they would have pursued these opportunities in order to build up the acreage on their farms, or in some cases, build up from a tenancy to a farm owner.
Oh, okay.
So great opportunistic times for the 30s, as well as being a time of Great Depression as well. So that summarises that era.
Yep.
Beyond that, history goes back to the time when horses abounded on the farm. And of course, I am fortunate in a way to remember horses on the farm working. I think they were probably saved from the knacker's yard at the time, as opposed to being true working horses.
Okay.
Because
not thoroughbreds then.
No, they were big old cart horses.
Okay.
Shire horses.
Yes. Workers.
They were workers, all right, but they'd done their time. And so I grew up with a couple of horses and the occasional very small tractor and various antiquated bits of kit on the farm, such as an autoblast for spraying the apples and horse harrows, all that type of thing. Because you never had any power harrows or things like that. So when it came to actually cultivating the land, you would have just normal harrows. So you'd be dragging those over the land
By horse.
many, many times.
Yep.
Until eventually you got a seedbed. So it's hard work getting a seedbed.
Yes.
But the main thing is that your furrows of the plough were actually quite low, being horse-drawn. So you didn't have these massive horses' heads to break down, as you would have in the modern
Yes.
15-inch ploughs,
Yes.
which are 15-inch wide. That's a problem, so you're creating a problem for yourself. So, in fact, it was much easier in those days to have that type of plough to break the soil down.
Now, you mentioned horses now. Obviously, horses, you had to get up very early in the morning to feed them, prepare them for the whatever you're going to put onto it.
Yeah.
So what time in the morning would you think about raising the horses ready for work then?
Well, I think realistically, because I'm not that old, it would be before my time. So I'd have to relate it to another time.
Yes.
And that time would be sort of 40s and 50s and before that.
Yeah.
And of course, with anything on the farm, you'd have to get up early.
Yeah.
Whether it was steam, you ought to get steam
Of
up
course.
as well.
Yep.
And the horses would need preparation in terms of feeding. And you don't put them to work directly after feeding. That's a great mistake.
No.
So you don't want to do that. You want to make sure they're well fed and then be ready for work.
Ah,
So
okay.
there's always a bit of a gap between the two.
So you had horses. You went from horses to steam, did you?
No, steam happened at the same time as horses.
Oh, really?
So I'd like to say I remember steam. I certainly remember the steam trains causing havoc in the nearby moat field, as we call it,
Yep.
when the spark alighted in the field and the whole field went up.
Oh, really?
And I was 5, I think, and I remember going around all the firemen and congratulating them with a basket of plums. And they were quite grateful
I bet
to
they
receive a
was.
plum or two
Yeah.
for that purpose. Yes, so that was the first big fire I'd come across, I think,
On this farm we
on
are.
this farm.
Fantastic.
Yes, in that field over there.
I do interrupt. Please carry on.
Yes, so that was then. So going back to steam. Steam is something that I don't think I grew up with. No, I think steam was something that I may have encountered when it came to thrashing time. We certainly had a tractor, which would have been an old Marshall, Field Marshall, single cylinder, that type of thing. I think that is what I remember rather than steam. But having said that, I do remember being very, very young indeed, and remembering the branch line that went through or just above the farm to the south, and remembering the comforting hoot hoot of the engine. And one day it wasn't there. I said, "Where's that nice hoot going? Where's it gone?" to mother and father, and they said, "Well, I'm afraid that line it's gone. It's been ripped up." And it was a very sad time. To forget that must have been 1963, in fact. So I couldn't have been that young. I must have been 10 at least.
So that was Dr. Beecham, was it?
It was Dr. Beecham who eradicated everything. He didn't. No prisoners as far as lines were concerned. He just took everything up, unfortunately.
Now, we had a video which we were going to show about hops. Now, was the railway intricate for picking the hops up? Was they to deliver them to London to the brewers? Would you say?
Yes, the railways were very important for picking up agricultural produce. In fact, there's a lane which tells you that. It's called Churn Lane, which you would know. I should say Churn Lane because that's the true name, but the local dialect has transformed it into Chun. And that is where the churns used to be picked up from the stop there at the junction and taken up to London. And that's how they did it in those days. Of course, all the fresh fruit went up via that singular halt and went up to London in a very fresh state.
Yes.
That's the way it was, yes.
Fantastic. Sorry, I do digress. I think of these things on occasions, and please carry on from where you was. You went from steam and the railways.
Yes. Well, as I say, we never really, or I personally, would not have been encountering steam too much. I was just a bit too young for that. Certainly a couple of horses. But then, of course, it was diesel. It was TVO in the tractors, diesel and the like.
And what tractors would you use on the farm? What was the makes? Because it's a lot of Fergusons around this area, aren't there?
Well, they say that you're either a Ferguson farm or a Ford farm. Some people went down the Ford line, and other people went. Massey Harris was a favourite,
Oh yes.
which preceded Massey Ferguson,
Yep.
and of course, TVO was the fuel, tractor vaporising oil, not diesel.
No.
Took a bit more starting and the like, and then diesel came in. Of course, that was a breakthrough in a big way, because diesel is what the whole country is run on these days.
Yeah. And of course, TVO. You didn't start it on TVO, did you? You started the engine on petrol first.
I
didn't
believe you did, yes. I can't remember those days, but there were a few of those tractors on the farm when I was first about. So I had nothing to do with starting them, but just
Right.
observing them, that's all.
And how many tractors would you have on a farm of this size at that specific time?
Well, we'd have about 6, I suppose.
Yeah.
And each man had his own tractor. So if it went wrong, it was up to the man to actually get it right.
Right, because they was farm mechanics in those days, wasn't it?
They were jack of all trades, as
Yes.
people have to be even now, even with these computers that have crept into farming in a big way.
Of God, yes. Yes, we do that.
Our favourite subject, of course.
Now, we spoke about your farmer history, and now tell me about the crops you used to grow. Now, I know hops was a big thing in your family. Was it always hops, or was it fruit, or was it arable, or what did you, as a child, did you remember?
Well, I remember as a child growing up with everything about me. I mean, we did have everything, and everything. All these farms had many enterprises. Of course, what we're talking about is hops here in Kent.
Yep.
Apples. We would have had plums. We would have had pigs. We had chicken. We had bullocks. We had. I must have left one out, but that's the type of
A
farm
very
we had.
mixed farming. That's what farming was all about, wasn't it, in those
That's
days?
what it should be about to
Yes.
a greater extent, rather than monoculture.
Oh, is that what it's called, monoculture now, where we just have it?
We're forced into less and less crops.
Yeah. You're either an arable farmer or a cattle farmer, livestock
Yes,
farming,
that's right.
that sort of thing.
Yes, but the arable and the cattle go together. Because you've got to integrate.
The manure,
the
of course.
Of course, it's cyclonic. And that's how
Fantastic.
it should be. It should be totally self-servicing, from the point of view of manures and the like.
Yeah. We spoke about hops. I don't know why, but I'm a lover of the hop industry as they was. Bit of a nostalgic point of view from my
Yes.
thing. And I love talking about
Yes.
the old days, the Londoners coming up to pick the hops. Of course, they used to pick them in the field many years ago, didn't they? They
Yes.
didn't have machines or anything like that. And
No.
as we said in the video, which we were going to show after this one, they used to be picked into a basket or something, wasn't they? A pig and a poke, you said, or was that?
Well, no, the bines
The binds, yes.
would have been put into a long barrow, Hessian underneath.
Yeah.
It's called a name, I forget now, because I wasn't associated with them much. The whole vine would have been laterally placed,
Yeah.
pulled down and placed like that. And by hand, of course, all these hops would have been plucked off, one by one, into bushels,
Ah, okay.
into baskets. And you measure
Bushel baskets.
Yes, you measure by the bushel, and then the talisman would then record very accurately exactly what you had picked, so you'd be paid correctly.
Oh,
in
really?
those days.
That's fantastic. And obviously, now, these families that come from London, did you have your father or your grandfather have specific families they used on a regular basis?
I believe so, yes. It's always, the Smiths have said yes again, and all this type of thing. So you'd have the same families repeating their visits over a period of time in a
Really?
big way. They liked to come down here because this was one of the few farms that had hot water. Because we had a boiling system of hot
Yes.
water. So they liked this one in comparison to a lot. So, yes, we had same old names coming down from the East End of London.
Really? Now, would you send them a rail ticket out so they can get down here, or would they make their own ways down here?
A postcard would be sent around, and then they send it back with ticks and crosses on those postcards, because the postcards would be in print, and they weren't necessarily over good at writing or understanding
No.
unless it was in print. So it made it easier for them. to say yes or no, and they did a simple postcard and they'd just send back.
And what time of year would that go at? Would that be like September time?
No,
would it?
before that, because we start in September, so that would be July.
July?
I would guess July. I'm not sure, because that would be about right. Yes.
And the hops was picked from when? The dates when the hops would be picked
Well,
from?
you can say roughly about 1st of September onwards.
Really?
Like that, yeah.
And a farm of this size, would it take many weeks to do that sort of thing?
I should think a month.
A month.
Yes, because of all the hops and the slowness of labour really is very slow compared with a machine.
But you did say on previous video you had permanent workers on the farm,
Yes.
and they would do the Elsthouse work, would
They
they?
do the specialist work.
Yes.
So
So,
you'd have certainly one in the garden, you know, the overseer in the hop garden.
yeah.
You'd also have the hop dryer, who was a very important person, and he would be feel very important as well. And sometimes they would get a little bit too big for their boots, but that's natural on a farm.
Of
They're
course.
given them responsibility and they're not used to it.
Yes.
It was a very responsible job, was hop drying.
I can imagine so. I mean, the farm manager in those days was a proper manager. He knew when the hops are ready, when to send the pigs to the market, a bit of everything. A jack of, as you said, a jack of all trades.
Yes, there's a lot more skill and knowledge in that respect, because you have many more different enterprises to deal with, and therefore more skill.
And by keeping animals on the farm as well, because you had manure, and so you used to spread that onto the fields, did you, around hops?
Yes, you would have an alley bodge, which would be an old bit of kit, which would be pulled by a horse down the alleys of the hop gardens.
Okay.
So you would have a man at the back with a dung drag. Now, a dung drag, if you imagine a fork with the tines bent like that,
Yep.
you'd drag the dung out like that
Yep.
and put it where you need it.
Oh,
So
fantastic.
you'd have a man or two at the back of one of these alley bodges.
Alley bodges.
Alley bodge, yes. We've still got one on the farm, an alley bodge.
Have you really?
Yes, yes, yes.
You'll have to show me this one day,
yeah.
Mr. Wheeler.
I think they're quite common.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I know farmers who've got one or two alley bodges still on the farm, just nestling in the corner of a barn.
But this is what we should do. We should drag all that history out and
Yes.
pass it on, expose it, because
Expose to
all
pass
these
on.
tools
Yeah,
that we used to use, which are now forgotten, forgiven,
Yes,
And-
and the names have gone, haven't they?
the names are gone. The scrap man comes along,
Yes.
and he
Right.
just fixes old iron, but it's got such a history.
Yeah, I could tell a few tales, couldn't it?
It certainly could. And the workmanship. This is why, as you know, I'm a great believer in old tractors myself, and I like them in their working clothes, as I like to call them, not all painted and polished up, because you've lost the history of that
Yeah, of
tractor.
course,
Then,
yes.
you know, where the chap used to get on in the morning, he's got a rub mark where he used to get onto it.
Yes, that's right.
But that's the history of it all, isn't
Yeah,
it?
very much so.
Okay.
Yes.
So anyway, we move on now from the hops. Now you say you come out of the hops in the 90.
Early 90s, yes.
Yes.
We came out of that at the time, and I think everyone else was thinking about it. And we also had the problem of wilt, which was much worse than the West Midlands. And we then had to grow wilt-tolerant varieties, like Target. But it's all very well growing these things, but if the brewers don't want them, then that's another problem. And one of the problems with growing anything is that the British brewing industry were not particularly interested in the growers of hops in this country, and therefore we weren't supported as well as we should be.
Unlike Germany.
By the brewers, unlike Germany, because no sooner do you put a hop in the ground than they would say, well, we don't want that, you've got to grow something else. Well, you can't carry on like that, can you?
No.
You just can't. So that was one of the reasons why we grew up, and apart from, if they don't want it, the prices aren't there. Where the inputs are, and the inputs, as I've said, are massive. 22% is input in the hop growing industry. So that's pretty massive. Or it certainly was when I was at college.
Yes.
May have changed now, maybe 50%, who knows? But I don't know. It's difficult to say.
Yes, I can
These
imagine.
costs going up all the time, you see.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, we move on from hops. Which industry did you go into after hops disappeared off your farm?
Well, hops, one industry of hops went off, and I think I then experimented with a hop garden still up, just in case we should go back into hops, and removing most of the poles and putting a combine harvester in the hop garden. Which
In between the hops?
Yes, which was an unusual sight. I have actually a picture of that somewhere here.
Oh, that'd be
However,
fantastic. Yes.
Somewhere I think there's a magazine article all about that, saying Mr. Wheeler has hope for hops in the future, but unfortunately that didn't occur.
So did you have hop contracts?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we did have hop contracts, and of course the whole industry is based on the quality of your contract, and if you didn't have one, you were on the world market, which would be pretty questionable at times, and so
Yes.
you'd probably have to sell your hops at a loss. One of the great things about the Hops Marketing Board, which came into being in 1932, I think it was the fact that you could regulate your output by leaving, say, 10% not actually harvested. So you'd leave them to blow in the wind.
Oh, really?
So you'd maintain a level of demand by not having oversupply, which is a good thing.
Yes, because if you oversupply, the price goes down, doesn't
Yes, but oversupplying does no one any good, really, for the future.
it? Yes.
Someone might win on that, yeah, but you've got to, you've got to have a good contract, which is index linked. But of course, when the EU came about, our membership of the EEC, as it was then, the problem then was that the EEC or the EU actually banned all marketing groups of that nature.
Oh, really?
So the Dairy Marketing Board and the Hops Marketing Board and all that went. EU rules.
My God.
So that scuppered us as well, But there were some very low points in the 1880s and the 1900s, early 1900s. All that time, hops were in a very questionable
Fragile.
situation.
Yep.
Yes, exactly. At that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's very innovative of you to actually retain the hop gardens
Yes.
and try to grind the corn. So you've always got a backwards way back into that, rather than a lot of hop growers. They removed everything and just flattened the field
Yes.
and
Yes.
grew an arable crop.
Yeah.
So you say it didn't work. Now I know Mr. Pemble, Mr. Peter Pemble. He went into dwarf hops.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
And did you ever experiment with that?
No, we kept well out of the way. We wanted to see how other people got on with them.
Yeah.
And the end result was that the yield just was never going to be there.
Not
And
there.
that was the main reason why dwarf hops actually did not succeed. It's a great idea in principle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we've got some lovely pictures in front of us now, which you're going to show the camera of the fruit. You used to grow fruit on apples, and particularly apples.
Yes.
And you've got a couple of pictures. If you'd like to show the viewers these pictures, you've got.
Yes, I'd like to do that. Yeah. Right. I'll just get my gadget here. Better than a finger and a thumb. First of all, we have a picture. Let me get the glasses. Actually, here's some. Here we are. Taken in. We might have a date on this. Actually, not on that one, and on this one, same. Okay, no date, but I can estimate this as being in the 1940s. Is my thought. So here we have a picture of the fruit packing station as it was in the 1940s. A little bit closer, perhaps. There we are.
Which I shall edit. You won't see it so well. But I shall edit a photograph which I originally taken into the video anyway, and you'll probably see a better view of it there. But you say in the 1940s that was?
This would have been 1940s, I believe, yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And what sort of apples did you grow there? Did you grow any Pacific?
Well, we had cooking apples on this farm, not eating apples. It was not a place for the Cox orange pippin here on this farm because it was not the right soil. And we just had Bramley's Howgate Wonders. We also had Newton's. We had Beauty of Bath and that type of old type of apples.
Sorry, I must stop you. You said Hoggins.
They were called Howgate Wonders.
Oh, okay.
Howgate Wonder. So that was one type we had. We only made any money out of that one year when I think the country ran out of sugar. They are a sweeter apple than the Bramley, and the Bramley needs sugar in the cooking of the
Oh,
Bramley.
okay.
So yes, they're not. Well, they were really for pollination as opposed to a commercial variety.
Okay. And we're back in the 40s now. Now,
Yes.
you did show me a photo, which I will edit it into the video, of your father. Now, your father was
yes.
in the what was he in?
Well, he was in the home guard like farmers were.
Yep.
Someone had to stay behind to mine the coal, to produce the food, etc., etc., to make the ammunition. There are an awful lot of people who had to stay behind. He was one of those, and so he had good recollections of the war.
And you a photograph of him, which
yes, we do.
again,
You have that? Yes.
which we will edit into
Yes.
the. If you just show it quickly, and I will
Briefly,
edit.
I have the photograph, which is, of course, should have been under my hand, but it's.
We've lost it again, have we?
Yeah, we are slightly in disarray here, but it's all right.
There we go. It's just I just
Did you
see it
see it?
underneath that lot.
Did you see it?
Keep going, keep going,
Oh,
keep
well
going.
done, yes.
There you go.
Okay, well,
If you just show it to the camera, and I will. It doesn't matter because I'd edit the photograph into the shot anyway.
this is a photograph of the Home Guard
Fantastic.
in the 1940s.
Yeah.
I think, yes.
And your father is. We discussed this earlier. Your
Yes.
father's just about fourth from the right. Is he there?
Second row up, yes.
Second row up. Fantastic.
Yes.
I shall edit that into the video anyway.
Not quite in charge, though. I'm sure the people in charge weren't farmers, but there we are.
No. Michael, you've got a certificate of your father of being in Home Guard. Did everyone receive that certificate when they was? If you would like to hold that certificate up.
Oh, yeah, I do have one. Everyone who was in the Home Guard, I believe, had one of these to commemorate their
Fantastic.
action and the fact that they assisted in the end result.
Fantastic. Now, did it go right? When was the Home Guard formed originally? That was midway, wasn't it? It wasn't straight off.
No, because to begin with, they were called something different, weren't they? The land.
Not the Land Army, because the Land Army was.
They were different. I can't remember the name, but they had a different name, and then they became the Home Guard after their first name.
Yep.
So the formulation name was different from
Dad's Army, I suppose, or something
no,
like that.
it wasn't that. It was
No.
something else, but I can't.
And that's so.
Local Defence Volunteers, LDV, I believe.
LDV, that sounds about right.
Yes.
Now, obviously, the men was away at war. Now, did you have the ladies come and work on the farm? Did you?
Yes, we had ladies in wartime. We had prisoners as well, quite a few Germans, Italians as well.
Of course, because we've got an old prisoner of war camp not far from here, haven't we? Really on 7 Mile Lane, isn't it?
Quite, yes, that's right, up there, absolutely
Yes.
right. MOD area.
Yeah.
Yes, so we had Germans, all right. We made friends with many Germans. We made friends with many Italians. In fact, one of the chaps on the farm, he was an old boy called Frank Brown, and he was fascinated by all these new people coming into the farm, and he had this great aptitude which would not have been recognised had not the Italians and the Germans come along, because he had an aptitude for language.
Oh, really?
And so it wasn't long before he would be saying, lava stanza agua e vino, similar, because, turn off the water to an Italian like that. He really came into his own at that time, which
Yep.
is quite amusing looking back. Yes.
Yes. And well, after the war, obviously we're still into hops, and you've gone into arable now, and I think we've gone through most of your history of it. But you got one last thing before we leave the war area about a German bomber crashing on the farm. Is that correct?
No, it was a fighter.
Oh, was it a
Yes,
fighter?
it was a fighter, and it was called an ME-110, and apparently it was one of the first to hit British soil.
Oh, really?
So it happened on the 20th of October 1940, lunchtime. You may recall it was a Sunday, you may not. However, it was a Sunday, and lunch was interrupted by the fact that the plane was droning about above, trying to land successfully on its belly. The plane was first instigated above the Thames, doing a photographic mission of bomb damage in that area, and it was then sighted by 92 Squadron from Biggin Hill, and Squadron Fighter Villa and Brown Kinkham, they went up in their Spitfires, and they shot the thing up. So, well, it wasn't one way, because I think Kinkham had to parachute into Tunbridge on that occasion. But they were both all right. But the navigator was killed in the 110. And eventually it came down, and father and his brother-in-law were here, and they arrested the pilot. And the pilot did ask for a cigarette, and also he asked if he could pay his last respects to the navigator. And of course the mission was occluded, because it's very important to keep that plane in British hands in a full state. But the problem was that he fired up everything, including the navigator, in the plane.
Oh, incinerated.
So you were left with a mangled bit of
wreckage
of aluminium and not much else. I've been over to the site, and what have I picked up with a metal detector? Just aluminium and bullets and a few cogs, and that's about it. You know, there's nothing left. But I think the main part of the plane, I think, was put under a road that we were going to renovate, and so we had that for a bit of bulk under the road. So that is where
make use
of it. But a lot of them would have been taken back to Surrey, I think it was, in an old Bedford truck, and that would have been taken for reuse and then dropped over Germany. So recirculating the metal. Yes.
Reusable.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned trucks there. Did you have trucks on the farm as well? Your own truck on the farm to pick the pickers up from the station or anything like that?
Well, I can't remember those days too much, but I think we had a sort of van or so, and they would have come along in a chevron or bus from the station, that type of thing. We had a lorry on the farm, but it never had enough use, so I sold that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a small D500. It's Ford, I think it was.
Really?
Yeah.
Now we've gone through a lot of history of your family and your farm and your crops and one thing and that. Now the future. Now we want to go on to the future of the farming. Now obviously we're both at that age when we don't want to be tendering the fields or being out in the cold weather, do we? So we hand that on to our younger generations, and which way forward are we going now, then, Mr.
Well, you're looking for a younger man to take over the farm, or indeed a woman. It doesn't matter. They're both capable, and I have a nephew in line who is very switched on in many ways, in a more modern way than his uncle, and that you have to be to keep up with what's going on.
A farm machinery, for argument's sake, it's just going so far.
Well, I'm thinking not only farming, I'm thinking about alternative uses for farms these days.
Yes, exactly.
Because there are many. And it is a bit of a job to know which way the government is thinking. What is their main agenda?
This is what I'm going to come on to in a minute, but I have noticed you have gone into a big way of solar panels on your farm, haven't you?
Well,
it's not a crop as such.
Well, we've always harvested the sun on the farm to produce a crop.
Yes.
And we're doing the same. So the sun is being harvested in order to transform it into a different type of crop, which is called electricity.
Yep.
Which then gives warmth and other
cheap energy
in general.
Yes.
So, we've always produced energy on the farm. In the days of mangel wurzels,
oh my God,
you
yes.
actually put those in to feed the horses.
Yes.
So there's an energy crop there. So we're just growing another energy crop.
Another crop, yes, exactly.
So I'm interested in dual farming, really.
Well, you've got to be in this day and age.
Yes, but dual farming on the same area. Oh, so I'm interested in putting sheep in at the same time. So effectively, you'd have...
Around the solar panels?
Yes, because there's not much in the way of livestock that you can put in without the livestock damaging the solar panels. So,
but there is a reason. I was talking to someone about this, but the trouble with sheep, they tend to eat the cables of the solar panels.
Yes, that is right, yes. So only the other day did we have a discussion, and I said, please can you put in sheep-proof cables in the installation to make sure that the sheep can be there, or insulate them, or put
a guard round them as such.
Yes, a guard, or barbed wire around whatever you do. And so that should hopefully be done, because it does not make too much sense to have all those panels without sheep or something underneath.
Well, that's a true farmer, though, Mr. Wheeler, though, isn't it? That's a true farming instinct.
So. Maximising.
You said originally about the hop garden and the growing a crop in between the hop garden when it was going there.
Yes.
And now you're doing the same by bringing the solar panels in and putting another way of farming in between that. And that's a fantastic idea, isn't it?
Well, it's more pleasing, more efficient, isn't it? Therefore, if you're efficient, you're pleased with yourself, as opposed to being inefficient, and then you're not. And that's the big difference. But I think a lot of these panels in Spain, for instance, they're what it's called geotropic, and they go round with the sun. So the sun goes round, they get maximum shining on those panels.
Yes,
which is a very good thing.
Drawing the energy out of the sun. Yes.
So you'd have thought in Spain you wouldn't have to bother about that.
No.
They do. And the other thing is they elevate them enough so that they can grow brassicas underneath and that type of thing.
Really?
You need more light. So having elevated, you've got more light. So you can have a dual cropping in that way, as well as my idea of just putting sheep there, which is a hell of a lot better than goats or chickens and that type of thing. Because goats would just pick up the top and just stay
They'd
there.
be standing on top of them, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Now, we're coming to the end of the video, and I appreciate what we've been talking about this morning, this afternoon, and one thing and another. And I can see you're heading in the right direction by one of your nephews taking over the farm.
Yes, indeed.
And something I just want to bring up here at the end of the video, really, what we're going through at this present time with our new Prime Minister, who's put tax on the farming and for handing the farm over to your children or your nieces or whoever. What's your feeling on that? Do you think it's to the detriment of farming? Well, it is, because they'd have to pay death duties and that sort of thing.
Yeah, well, I think every farmer has a feeling on that, and it's pretty well negative.
Yes.
Because the government have not done any purposeful, realistic sums whatsoever on the effect of that massive tax that it'll be. Because what's happened, as everyone knows, is that the land prices have gone way up. Okay, £10,000, whatever, is a round figure. So if that's what's being taxed, now if that's being taxed, of course, you've built up your business, which is on top of that land.
Which you've put a lot of hard work into.
Well, not only me, it's generations and generations to get where we are today. And being a very low remunerative industry, you do have the problem of time. It takes so much time to build up anything if you're still in the game. Most people are not interested in farming. I wonder why not. It's because the money isn't there.
It's not a 9 to 5 job, is it, really?
No. But you've got to have it in the blood, I think. And I think it's a bit like, I saw a vicar, and the vicar said, why on earth do you do this job? And I said, well, vicar, it's a bit like you. It's a bit of a calling, isn't it? And he said, well, I suppose you're right, It's rather nice to... But it is all to do with that.
It is.
And it's carrying the whole gambit forward to the next generation, and that's what it's.
We're only custodians, aren't we?
Oh yes.
At the end of the day, we say we own the land, we own the crop, but we're just, because for that moment in time, we're just looking after it, aren't we?
I'm taking great pride in doing so.
Exactly, keeping it tidy, looking nice.
Look, here I am in Kent, the most beautiful county in England.
Yes.
And there's no more beautiful county. Kent and East Sussex, fantastic to me. This is my home, and that's where I've been all my life. So I think that that's part and parcel of, what is your role in life, you say? I think mine would be probably to keep Kentish, but of course that is an uphill struggle with all the building that's going on at the moment.
Oh, please don't get me started on what they're doing.
I don't want to go into that too much, but I mean, it's desecration of something beautiful, which I am very much against, as you may know.
Well, with sadness, that I'm going to end this interview now with you, because I've loved the day we've had together and you talking to me, and I'm going home with a smile on my face. So please introduce yourself one last time and your name of your farm, please. Your name is?
I'm Michael Wheeler, and the farm is called Bockingfeld Farm, and it's near Marden.
We're much appreciated.
Thank you.